invito a salire sul palco la signora Miriam Jenny, che diciamo, è responsabile della ricerca scientifica presso l'Harding Center for Risk Literacy del Max Planck Institute for Human Development a Berlino. Dopo l'ottenimento del dottorato all'Università di Basilea, ha trascorso 2 anni al Center for Adaptive Rationality quale ricercatrici postdoc, ottenendo il premio Otto Hahn assegnato dalla Max Planck Society. Sicuramente un premio molto importante. In seguito è entrata nel mondo della salute, lavorando 1 anno in qualità di data scientist presso la National Association of Statutory Health Insurance Physicians. La sua ricerca, e qui viene la parte un po' difficile nella presentazione, è focalizzata nell'interazione tra psicologia, scienze informatiche e medicina. Attualmente sta sviluppando una metodologia per aiutare la presa di decisioni in ambito medico. Pensiamo soprattutto all'importanza di un albero decisionale efficace nel campo anestesiologico e nella medicina d'urgenza, dove la signora Jenny è particolarmente attiva. E questo per permettere delle prese di decisioni efficaci e rapide. Ne studia i rischi e in particolare la percezione dei rischi, risk communication e risk literacy. Grazie signora Jenny per aver accettato di partecipare al nostro simposio.
Grazie. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. In our everyday lives, we get confronted with information about risk and danger almost every day. And in this past barbecue season, we got warned again of the dangers of eating sausages. And this has started in 2015 when the World Health Organization published a report that said that there's an 18% increase in risk of colon cancer per 50 grams daily consumption of processed meat. And then this got picked up by the media, and ever since it's picked up every barbecue season when the media say that smoking kills, and so may eating sausages. Now, when you look at the VHW report in more detail, what you see is that the increase in risk of colon cancer actually was an increase from 5%, which is the baseline risk, to 6%, which is the increase per daily consumption of 50 grams processed meat. So if you look at the same information in terms of relative risk, the 18% increase looks quite large and alarming. But if you look at the baseline and the change in risk from 5 to 6%, you realize that the change is actually not that large, and you also get a feel of what the risk was to start out with. So at the Harding Center for Risk Literacy, we study how people perceive risk, how they react to risk, and how we can communicate risks to doctors, but also everyday people and patients in a way that they can understand it better. And we've developed some principles of good risk communication. And presenting the base rate, so the 5% in the sausage example, is one of those principles. And another important principle is also that we should always communicate in absolute risks instead of relative risks. And we should use matched framing. What different players in the healthcare system like to do, for example, the pharmaceutical company, is they communicate the benefits of a drug in relative risks, because relative risks tend to look big, but the harms in absolute risks, because absolute risks tend to look small, as you've seen in the sausage example. So what we should instead do is always use absolute risks for both harms and benefits of medical treatments or intervention or drugs. On our website at the Harding Center for Risk Literacy, we have a risk quiz where visitors of our website can test their own risk literacy. And one of the questions has to do with cancer screening. And it goes the following way. Imagine you have a friend, a female friend who just turned 50. And because she turned 50, she got invited to go to cancer screening. And even though she doesn't have any symptoms, the invitation looks quite serious. So she follows it up and she goes to cancer screening. And she ends up having a positive test result. And now she wonders what's the probability that she actually has breast cancer, given that she has a positive test result. So which of the 4 following answers is the correct one? Does she now have cancer for sure? Or do 9 out of 10 women with a positive test have breast cancer? Does 1 out of 10 women with a positive test have breast cancer? Or does 1 out of 100 women with a positive test result have breast cancer? Now, the true answer is that 1 out of 10 women with a positive test who didn't have symptoms actually have breast cancer. But a lot of women and doctors don't know this. And what it basically is the positive predictive value of mammography screening. And you can actually make this transparent to both doctors and patients using natural frequency trees. So what you see here are 1,000 women, and 10 of these have cancer and 990 don't have cancer. And then because mammography can make mistakes, out of the 10 women with cancer, 9 do have a positive test result and 1 has a negative test result. And from the 990 women without cancer, 89 still have a positive test result and 901 have a negative test result. So if you want to know the probability that a woman with a positive test result has cancer, you look at the women who had a positive test result, so the 9 plus the 89, and you divide the women who actually have cancer and the positive test result by that number, and you get the 10% positive predictive value. And we've tested this with patients, with medical students and doctors, and have shown that this format makes the quality of tests much more transparent to both doctors and patients. And you can do the same thing for the negative predictive value. So one of the things that we advocate is that you need to be able to provide the positive and negative predictive value of tests and screenings, at least if patients ask you about it. And also, you should always try to communicate in absolute numbers instead of percentages, because most people can understand absolute numbers. So, for example, 9 and 10 much better than percentages. And another point that is very important when you communicate about screening, especially when you communicate about the success of screening programs, is that there's a serious difference between survival rates and mortality rates. Survival rates can be very misleading, and there are several reasons for this, but one of them is the so-called lead time bias. So what we're looking at here is a group of men, let's say they die at age 70 of prostate cancer. So if they weren't screened, they maybe got diagnosed at 67 because they had some symptoms. So then in this group, the 5-year survival rate is 0, because all of these men got diagnosed at 67 and died at the age of 70. But if the same men would have gone through a screening process, they may have gotten diagnosed at say, age 60. Then their 5-year survival rate is suddenly 100%, because they get diagnosed at 60 and they still die at the age of 70. So screening programs can actually artificially inflate survival rates, which is why we should not use survival rates when you communicate about the success of screening programs, but we should use mortality rates instead. So that is one of the very important risk communication principles when it comes to cancer screening. But for a lot of people, it's kind of a difficult difference to understand. And at the University Hospital in Berlin, at the Charité, we tested last year medical students on a lot of concepts when it comes to understanding and communicating risks. And what we found is that the question about how you should quantify screening success, where the true answer would be mortality rates, before they got a risk intervention, so the blue bars are before a risk intervention, kind of teaching and risk, and the green bars are after the intervention. So before, almost no medical students could understand and answer the question about screening success correctly. And even after the training, only half could. And this may have to do with the fact that so often screening success gets communicated with survival rates instead of mortality rates. The good news is that on other questions, students were very good to begin with. And on most questions after the training, medical students understood the basic concepts of risks and risk communication. The difference between survival and mortality rate doesn't only confuse medical students, but it can also confuse doctors. So in another related study, we showed doctors 2 vignettes of cancer screenings, and one group got information on cancer screening using mortality data, and the other group of doctors got information using survival data. And after the doctors got the information, we asked them whether they would recommend this specific cancer screening to their patients. And if the doctors got the mortality data, fewer of them recommended the cancer screening to their patients or said they would recommend it than if the doctors got survival data. So even doctors can be influenced with using either mortality or survival data. But using evidence-based communication, such as mortality rates for cancer screening success with patients, can actually sort of immunize them against the influence of non-evidence-based recommendations by doctors, which we showed in this study that just got recently published, where we had 2 groups of patients. And one of the groups got evidence-based information on cancer screening, and the other group got non-evidence-based information, such as survival rates. And after receiving this information, the patients also got a recommendation from a doctor that was non-evidence-based. And then we looked in both groups at those patients that differed from the doctor's non-evidence-based recommendation before having received the recommendation. And we found that in the group of patients that got evidence-based information and then the non-evidence-based recommendation by the doctors, only a few followed the doctor's recommendation. But if patients got non-evidence-based information to start out and then also the same type of recommendation by the physician, more patients followed the physician's recommendation. So what we show here is that you can actually help patients make more independent decisions from non-evidence-based doctors' recommendations if you inform them with evidence-based information about the risks of cancer screening. And the information formats that we develop at the Harding Center for Risk Literacy are so-called fact boxes. And this is one of our most, I think, widely used fact box. It's the one on breast cancer early detection. Now, fact boxes are basically a condensation of state-of-the-art evidence in medicine that is turned into a format that is simple to use and easy to understand for both doctors and patients. We try to base it on Cochrane systematic reviews whenever we can, and the development of these fact boxes is in line with the German recommendations for evidence-based health information. So we always very clearly state where the medical evidence comes from. In this case, it's the Cochrane systematic review. We also have a couple of introductory sentences, what the fact box is about, and what information is presented in the fact box. And then we also always clearly state the reference class, so that in this case, we're talking about women who are 50 years or older, who did or did not participate in screening for about 10 years. And then we communicate the main benefits and harms of cancer screening in this case for 2 groups of the same size, 1,000 women without screening and 1,000 women with screening. And in terms of benefits, what you can see here, that is out of 1,000 women who did not go to screening, 5 die of breast cancer, and out of 1,000 women who did go to screening, 4 die of breast cancer. But if you look at all types of cancer, actually the same number of women die of cancer in both groups. And when you look at the harms of the women who went to screening, you see overtreatment, that 5 out of 1,000 women were treated unnecessarily. And to make this even more transparent to patients, we also add icon arrays, usually on the back of the fact box, which is a simple graphical representation basically of the same table. So this is just the same table put into a graphic where you can see the women who died of cancer are the 21 red dots in each icon array. And then you also see the women who died of breast cancer, those are the red with a B, and the women who were overtreated in the screening group. And we develop our fact boxes with different partners in the applied medical field, for example, with the AOK, which is Germany's largest health insurance. And of course, we also test the fact boxes to see if they improve patients' understanding of medical risks. And in this study, what we did is we used the fact boxes that we developed together with the AOK, with the large health insurance, and we compared them to standard information brochures by the German Cancer Association. And so what we do is we have two groups of people, some that get the fact box that we developed with the AOK, and the other group gets the information from the German Cancer Association. And before they get the information, we ask them a couple of questions about cancer screening. So how many women die, for example, if they go to get cancer screening or if they don't go to cancer screening. Then we give them the information in either format, and after that, test the women again. And if we present the women with fact boxes, after they've studied the fact boxes, they're able to correctly answer more questions than if they had been presented with the standard brochure from the German Cancer Association. So our fact boxes can really increase understanding of risks in patients. And since we're meeting in Switzerland today, I looked at the most up-to-date cancer brochure from the Swiss Cancer League that just came out in 2017. And while it has some positive information, for example, there are sentences about the harms of breast cancer screening, it also has information that kind of looks transparent but isn't that helpful in the end. Where, for example, you see 1,000 women here who go to screening, and then you basically see what happens to them. So how many have a negative test result, how many have a positive test result, and out of those, how many women actually then had breast cancer and how many didn't. So the patients get a feeling for that there may be false alarms, but what this brochure still lacks is really a clear comparison of the benefits and harms of breast cancer screening in the form of a fact box that would make it easy to kind of weigh the pros and cons of screening for patients. Other players in the Swiss healthcare system are more transparent, however. So we're currently developing fact boxes on different type of topics together with Helsana, one of the main Swiss health insurances. And they were actually, out of all of the health insurances that we work with, were the first, internationally, the first health insurance who were brave enough to publish fact boxes on breast cancer and prostate cancer screening. In Germany, so far, no one has had the guts to do so, and also not in other countries. So Helsana did so, and actually they received a lot of positive feedback. And what they did is they took the fact boxes that we developed together and then turned them also into informational videos where patients get informed about what breast cancer is, what mammography screening is, and they get presented the information that is contained in the fact box. And they can also download the fact box from the webpage. So, of course, we hope to do more and more of this work. We don't only disseminate fact boxes on breast cancer screening, but on all different types of medical tests and treatments and interventions. We're always looking for new collaborators, and we would be very happy to be approached by any of you who are here today if you are interested in coming up with more decision aids that can help both doctors and patients understand medical risks better and can also facilitate the discussion between doctors and patients. Thank you very much.